All right. And welcome back to another episode. I'm Wesley Livingston,
I'm Mike Scaramella.
and we're your hosts here at the Culture and Sports Podcast. And today we have an extremely special guest here with us today. He's a sports attorney, an educator, a leader, currently a law professor at Penn State University, where he also serves as the university's athletic integrity officer and the president here at Culture and Sports. Robert Boland, how are you doing today?
Gentlemen, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me here. I probably should throw one more Penn State connection in just to keep everybody happy. I also teach in the labor school, the School of Labor.
Okay.
Oh, very nice.
And I love both the law school and labor school equally. So they're my two favorite children.
So we can't leave any of them out.
Yeah, we're going to have to get into all of that then, huh?
Perfect. Well, we do definitely want to start at the beginning. We want to kind of know how you got involved in sports to begin with. And where this passion kind of came from in the beginning.
Well, I think like most kids, everybody loves sports. It is one of the big, huge cultural connectors. And ironically enough, I sort of had the twofold. My athletic career ended in college, playing football and wrestling at Columbia. I went on to grad school and worked at the University of Tennessee, and really decided I felt most alive when I was working in sports. I worked in the athletic department at Columbia after I graduated. I worked in the athletic department at the University of Tennessee, and I really was intent then to kind of have a career in sports that was meaningful. And I, strangely enough, thought I could do it a couple of different ways, but ultimately it kind of appealed to me that going to law school was the right answer. That being a lawyer and representing players or representing coaches or being involved in sports as a lawyer, and this was in the early '90s. So the law degree sort of still was the specialized graduate degree in sports. So off I went to get a law degree, to have a sports law career, and immediately did something very different as a prosecutor and some other things. So my path was a little windy, like a lot of people. I think I wanted to be a football coach for a while, but my mother didn't want her Ivy League, who was a school principal, didn't want her Ivy League educated son to be a football coach. If she had only an idea of how much football coaches make now, right?
Right. I was just going to bring that up. I was like, these guys, yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot of time.
A lot of time.
Put in it's a lot of days. Yeah.
But you know what? It really allowed you to wear a bunch of different hats. It's not like you got, a lot of people will get, kind of comfortable in one spot and not move around. And I feel like you had good people around you, a good team, maybe good mentors to kind of shoot you forward in the right direction.
But I've always been able to hold the job and leave them and move on to what was next. So I've had a couple really good, good arcs in my career. I was a player agent for about 10 years. I had some stints as a judge and a practicing lawyer, and those were all really rewarding. And then I kind of hit my most rewarding thing in 2001. I never have to worry about my anniversary date because it was September 11th of 2001. I taught in first class at NYU, and the rest was history.
Yeah.
I became a full-time faculty member shortly after that. I became the chair of the department, and I was all in. It was the best job I've ever had. So even though I don't primarily teach right now, I have an administrative position, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more as we go on. Teaching was always at the centerpiece of what I did, and there's one thing I think about teaching, and also an evolving study like sports. The thing about teaching is you're always a smarter practitioner when you teach it. So you're involved not only in the work you do, but you're involved in explaining it to people and helping guide their careers in it. So if you think about a career being a collaborative art, the idea that a lawyer has a practice model that isn't like not just a job, but it's a practice, it's things they grow with. All those are things I've done, and it's allowed me to always choose things that are interesting, always things that are cutting edge, and things that are next. And a lot of that, the importance of sports hasn't changed for me. From the time I was 7 and we'd all gather around the TV on Saturday and watch Wide World of Sports, it is the biggest cultural connector in the world, and it still is for me.
Absolutely, and for us too. We've played sports our whole lives. We know how important it was for the camaraderie.
That's how we met.
Yeah, that's how we met in the first place.
Yeah, playing baseball on the baseball field.
But it's just crazy. It's just crazy to think that the culture. It actually stems from back then. From a young age. You get that camaraderie. You have that culture, and if it's a good culture and you got lucky with good coaches and things like that, then you're lucky enough to bring that forward in your career and things like that. And it definitely is that you've done that.
You build lifelong relationships and friendships, also, because we still talk to some of our coaches. We still, talk to old teammates to this day, and it's because of those times together and like the lessons we learned and the camaraderie and
the most
just those experiences that last forever, and that's what
intense
sports kind of brings
relationship.
to the table.
It's the one that it has a performance aspect, it has an immediacy, and it has a place where, I hope you loved your high school English teacher and you needed to know how to use an adverb, but not everybody's quite as bought into that as they are about their team and their identity. So yeah, sports is by far the most intense relationship.
Exactly.
And I have a great passion for coaches and wanting to help them. So a lot of the work I've written on with you all at Culture and Sports has been on how to protect coaches and how to see the pitfalls. I think most coaches are extraordinary, but there are challenges, and sometimes they just get out of their orbit occasionally and need some correction.
And what would you say? Just an example. Do you have an example? Maybe a challenge that you might be able to help a coach out with that might be listening to the show right now.
Integrity officer, and to some degree, I'm charged with investigating coaches, but I also think I'm charged with preventing problems for coaches. And I think if I can work with them on prevention, help them manage situations, help them manage their own reaction, I help them be the best version of themselves sometimes and avoid problems before they ever happen.
Yeah, do you find out the more that you do
still
it?
Pretty bad.
The more you learn about it, the better you get. Obviously, I feel like a lot of the times when you teach something,
and I think for a lot of coaches, and this is maybe, I don't want to get too much into this because we may want to talk about some more subjects and we'll leave it open, but the ground between coaches and their teams and their environment is shifting quickly. We're definitely in changing times, and while I think really good coaches are smart and never fall victim to problems, some find it hard to adjust. Some find it hard to deal with the way players are today or the way parents are today. And just thinking about that conversation and how all of those things come together, it's much easier to solve those problems, to kind of pick those knots one at a time as opposed to all at once or in a crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, did you get into a lot of that? You're a sports lawyer, sports attorney. Did you get a lot of that in the beginning, and did that kind of shape your way towards kind of your next endeavor?
Early on, it's funny you say that. I didn't necessarily think about that, but early on in my career, I got to be really close to a number of sort of famous coaching agents. Probably, I would say one of the people who's probably the most famous coaching agent in the world is a guy by the name of Bob Lamont. He has about 10 NFL head coaches even now. Bob's in his mid-70s, but Bob and I really have hit it off. He and his wife are like surrogate parents to me now. But but I didn't want to compete with Bob because he was a friend and because, well, I couldn't. He was so much better than I was. His practice was so, 10 NFL head coaches, another 10 general managers, a bunch of position coaches. Yeah, he pretty much has the game kind of sewn up. So I didn't want to compete in that space. I wanted to kind of find a way to work that was a complementary way. So I ended up representing a bunch of coaches who were getting fired in their out packages. So That's not exactly how you want to build a career, but it's a great way to understand how relationships go wrong. It's also a great way to kind of help the person through the crisis. And, this was usually performance-based. They were, they didn't win enough, so their athletic director or their team was going to get rid of them. And I was usually negotiating the package that got them out the door. So I wasn't getting the part of the big money on the front end.
Is this mostly college or professional coaches? Or?
But it was infrequent, but it gave me a really good perspective on the relationship and how to write the contract and how to ask for a position that put the coach back on the track of their life. There's a famous story. There's a famous story that when you think about it, ultimately that there's a great story that there are only two kinds of coaches: them that's been fired and them that's going to be. And how do you deal with a crisis like that? It's like every player gets cut or eventually has their career end for them, maybe not under the circumstances they want. But working people don't think about that necessarily the same way. So that became a really good thing to help me understand it. And in my role now that I have at Penn State as athletic integrity officer, where I'm trying to make sure that the university's athletic department functions in a way that meets all its promises to its community, to the law, to everyone. I think the coaches are an important constituency, and parents are an important constituency. The student athletes are an important constituency. The good of the sport and honor and decency and integrity are all important constituencies. But I think the coaches as humans are an important constituency, and I think I have some experience now in having some empathy and understanding and how to help them.
Yeah. Excellent. I understand you spent some time at NYU and Ohio University working on what's called the sports business. Can you explain
I love
kind
to
of
talk about this because these are my happiest years. The happiest time I have in my life is teaching. And the best thing I ever did was say yes to NYU. They told me, we'd like you to teach a class. And I said yes. I didn't ask how much they would pay. I didn't ask when it was. I didn't ask anything else. I just said yes.
I'm in.
And I kept saying yes for about 14 or 15 years there. And then I kind of got the NYU program that I helped build from sort of ground level grew to about 800 students. I 5-degree programs, had hospitality, tourism, and sports management, and had the first graduate degree in a master's in sports business as part of it that I taught the first class in that program, helped build it with a number of other faculty. And this was my baby. I will never have I'll never have a program that I'll see through from infancy to the. It was
the first of its kind, wasn't it? It was kind of new
city, and it got copied a lot. So in many ways, it's my happiest time, my greatest accomplishment time at NYU. I got recruited away to lead the program at Ohio University. Ohio University is the first graduate program studying sports as a business in the world. It started in 1967. I did 2 years kind of leading the graduate program that was the powerhouse in it, the world-ranked #1 program, MBA, MSA, Masters of Sports Administration. Alumni going back 51 years. 12 athletic directors is among its alumni ranks. So a really exciting program, very selective. They only take about 20 people a year. Well-funded, really hard to get into, but it's a great experience. And that was an awesome experience. And a lot of my time there taught me, it's kind of funny, I was teaching future college athletic directors. And what was I seeing? I was seeing college sports become far more complex, far more difficult. I was seeing athletic directors and coaches fired for mistakes along the way, whether it was Title IX, whether it was the failure to handle issues that were important, whether they were integrity issues. You can think about just kind of across the board that there have just been so many scandals in college athletics that even get the name of the institution and cost, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. So those things were going on, and I was sending people off to do it. I started teaching to that. I started teaching to, and I'm an old football guy. So what was I thinking about? There's an old saying in the NFL that the quarterback doesn't get sacked by one of the defensive linemen. They get sacked because you run a free blitzer at them. Once in a while the defensive end can beat the tackle and get a sack, but more often than not, it's running somebody free at them. The the overloader, the unblocked blitzer. And I started thinking about who the unblocked blitzer is that's going to get an athletic director or a coach and end their career. Because they're all prepared for all those other issues, right? They're prepared for, I need to win games, I need to raise money, I need to keep the stadium running, I need to have these things. What they're not necessarily prepared for, maybe an issue where
keep an eye on my players, I need to make sure
facilities maybe an issue where Title IX got involved, and the coach wasn't responsive enough. Maybe disciplinary issues, maybe student conduct issues, maybe coaching abuse issues. A lot of things that we didn't plan on out there are all things that are the reality. So what was I trying to do? I was trying to teach people to plan for the unblocked blitzer.
I'm thinking that a lot of these guys, they don't realize a lot of the things that they're going to be facing. So just in order to have some education on, hey, look, there's possibility that this stuff could happen. You got to keep an eye out for it. If somebody's doing this, you got to make sure and react or do certain things to.
So you need to have the power to understand how they attack, and how they can be asymmetrical in their attacks. So that was a
Yeah.
lot of what I did.
Oh, yeah.
And then I got this call one day from the deputy general counsel at Penn State, asking for some names to recommend to take this job as athletic integrity officer. It's the second person they ever had in it. It was a job that was very important to their recovery from the Sandusky issues. It was a job that was initially mandated as part of a settlement decree, and now was something they were going to continue on their own as part of what I would call basically a self essentially undertaken integrity program, not forced. Isn't it remarkable? Nobody.
Well, I feel like you almost have to have that these days. I mean, it's almost a
say that.
necessity.
The
I mean,
position has not been copied that many places.
it's going
But yeah, I think
it's going to just be so much more beneficial to have that than to just let it ride. You know, just to let it
didn't
go.
necessarily want the job. I came to interview for it certainly because I thought it was interesting to talk about, and I ultimately decided to take it. I thought I had to go do this for a while, because that's the other view I had about being a professor. I was never just in the faculty room. I was always out trying to prove it in the real world, whether it was in my consulting practice, whether it was in creating opportunities with my students, whether it was in creating partnerships. We have to, I believe in a very activist academy where we kind of have to prove our value in the real world every day. I, I can teach it to you, but if I'm out doing it too and showing you and bringing home examples, it's a whole lot better, right? It's
yeah, you have to practice these things. You have to put them into practice.
You go behind the scenes of any stadium or anything like that. You can.
Oh yeah.
We'll have to do that one of these days. We'll have to go out there and I want to learn a couple of things, and
I mean,
it should be definitely interesting.
Most sports fans will smile at, but one of the things people were getting in newly built stadiums, they were getting a beer room built in. Basically, you'd pipe the entire state. If it was a new stadium, you'd pipe the entire stadium so beer could be kept at a central location, and you could go via the tap in seconds to any place you pulled the tap in the stadium. It saved a lot of money because you could get larger kegs, you could store them safely, you didn't have to transport them. There were no workers' comp injuries from you doing it. But yeah, who would have thunk a beer room?
Oh, so this.
That's every college. That's like kind of every college student's fantasy, right? That's right. Can you imagine if you could put the tap?
That sounds fantastic. What a great idea. you feel like we would have thought about that a long time ago.
Sounds like something in your house. It sounds like
stadiums were transforming to do. Luxury boxes and club seats were drawing a lot of.
Oh, that'd be great. Right? Yeah, I'd never leave the house.
If you stay in sports for just a little while, there are so many changes that it's hard to see them come and go. Now, I've been around long enough that I've actually now watched some come, go, and come back a little bit. But it's interesting to think about how we're on the precipice of a constantly changing field of business. And if you think about it, sports if you aggregate all of sports, throw the entertainment aspect in, throw the travel aspect in, sports is about the 10th largest segment of the global economy. So it's not a small business. And even though COVID did a significant job interrupting it or slowing it down and changing it, it still went on even in COVID time. So it's got this whole social force, and then it's got this powerful business that runs with it.
Well, it's still an operating machine. Yeah, it's still.
And if people could actually learn how to incorporate the culture and the things that they've learned in these sports and bring it on to their careers and do things like that, as long as they've had good experiences, of course. There's many bad ones.
Well, even the bad ones can help.
Yeah,
you can learn from the bad experiences.
Absolutely.
It's kind of to learn what not to do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
As long as you walk away from them. Yeah, as long as you walk away from them and you get better and you go to the next thing, and then you'll be good, I feel.
So kind of keeping it somewhere similar where we're at. On July 1st of this year, players are now able to be paid on their name, image, and likeness. I kind of just want you to, what does that mean for an integrity officer? What does that mean for, does that change your daily routine? Does that make you want to go maybe back into player agency?
No. But let me share. If I were a normal integrity officer and not me, I would tell you that it wouldn't change a whole lot. You'd be worried about the policy. You'd be worried about how you implemented it. Hey, I'm somebody who, before I went to law school, wrote a paper in graduate school about the first recognition of the rights of name, image, and likeness, a case called Zucchini versus Scripps Howard Broadcasting. It was about a guy who got shot out of the cannon. And he got shot out of a cannon. He was a
Shot out of a
circus act.
cannon?
He was a human cannonball.
Oh,
And the news station basically
Huh.
filmed his entire act. They showed him getting in the cannon. They showed him getting shot out. They showed him falling in the net farther out. And he sued the broadcasters, saying, "You stole my entire act. You took my name and likeness and
And
put it
it
out
was
there." They said,
broadcasted
"No, we
over
have a
national
First Amendment
television.
right
Yeah.
to do it. We're a news network." And the Supreme Court in 1971, recognizing state law property rights, the rights to name, image, and likeness, added those as protected rights of people who were exercising in the stream of commerce. So I wrote this paper in graduate school in my master's program in communications. So the fact that I wrote a paper about the origins of NIL that got published in a competition somewhere along the line, and I represented athletes, and now I work at a university, so I'm implementing this policy. Yeah, this is pretty much my life come back around full circle. So I have had a
Yeah,
lot of
that's
experience
full
in
circle
this
right
area.
there.
So I'm working hard on the implementation. I'm working hard on working on the policy. I was lucky enough to kind of be tapped by our general counsel to look and work with our government relations office as Pennsylvania was thinking about passing a law and give some input to that. So I've been pretty much involved since the end of June, working on implementing NIL, and I've been part of a task force that started meeting twice a week in January. So I probably spend 4 hours a week that I didn't historically spend working on NIL, from, hey, reviewing the contracts that the deals that students are putting in to see if they're compliant with our policies and state law, to make sure that they're not in banned or prohibited categories, to help educate the student athletes that we have, because the first piece of any compliance program is really education. You can only comply with rules you know about, right? Yeah.
right.
Exactly.
And my understanding right now is that every state, as of now, has kind of different rules, but they're all using an NCAA standard
No, I wish
for
they
this
were.
year or something like that.
The
Yeah, that's what I was. It would have been
Are they
much
not?
easier than that. Much easier to do it that way.
Although it's sort of they relaxed the rules to create that. It wasn't exactly a standard. And every state has a slightly different law. I would tell you almost every state with, and I don't mean to pick on Mississippi, but I'll put one finger on Mississippi because they have the biggest deviation in the law. Almost every state has some categories that student athletes can't participate in NIL activity. So what we call vice categories: tobacco, alcohol, gambling, sports wagering, casinos, a few vaping, a few other categories.
The things that you would
just
think
don't go
for a
with institutional
collegiate
value.
athlete, yeah.
So they're pretty easy. Every school has some conflicted categories, and most of the state laws allow you to favor or protect conflicted categories. So if you have a pouring rights deal on your campus with one of the soda or water companies, if you have a deal with Nike or Adidas or Under Armour, those are usually carve-outs that you can keep student athletes from doing certain NIL activity in those categories.
So is that saying, like, say for instance, the school, it has a sponsorship with Adidas, and a kid goes out and gets a sponsorship with
could have the
New
right
Balance
to
on his own
yeah.
NIL?
Kind of depends on how they would approach that, but
Okay,
they could have the
okay.
right to say, hey, you can only do it on your time. You can't do it on school in the school context. You could never wear them in a game. There are limitations each school could place on that, and each school has taken probably a slightly different approach to that. And then I think the last really element of law is that almost everyone has some measure of how do you disclose what you're doing to the school. The NCAA had talked about having a clearinghouse.
Right.
Then that looked like it would be an antitrust violation because of the nature of the NCAA. So right now schools are sort of reviewing the deals and educating on their own. So I think most of the states that have laws are probably, they're all recognizable to each other because a lot of them read each other's laws. Let's be honest. And maybe there's some competition among the states in making their state law a little more favorable. To
Right. Yeah.
athletes,
Exactly. How do you do it? Let's take a look and see what the first one did, and then kind of base it on that.
Yep. So there are.
Right. Yeah. Come on over to our school.
And that can help. That can help recruiting and conferences and people.
And we were talking about that the other day
really
about
the
lawyer, conferences and different schools having more advantage. Getting people, players' names out there and things like that, which was super interesting.
As opposed to promoting yourself, and also how the school might promote you. They're all similar, but they're all just a little bit different. So if a school promotes you by putting your picture up on the web page, or taking a billboard, or putting out clips, or featuring an interview of you, that's school-based promotion. You're not going to get paid for that typically, but it could enhance your ability to create NIL opportunities. And it certainly would enhance your name, image, and likeness, because you're seen. The platform.
Right. And I did see a couple of things so if you have like a photo and you're in your school uniform, or you're doing something like that, or you're in your jersey
media or something.
You can't technically make any money if you're in your.
Most have a rule about how you use the uniform and the logos and the marks, and almost no student athlete wants to get billed for the misuse of the logos and marks, because that could be really expensive. So generally, the school can promote you using your name, image, and likeness in full uniform. You can use that more often than not in social media to promote yourself just generally. Having 12 million TikTok followers is a bit of an advantage. But when you switch over and are doing it for a sponsor, or are giving lessons, or are doing an appearance, suddenly that is what we would describe as NIL activity. And it was one of the historic prongs of kind of a pure amateur system that a lot of sports used to have. Amateur systems usually prevented you from paying for play or being paid to play. All right, that's still in effect in the NCAA. But the ability to use your name in other endorsements, or use your fame related to endorsements, that's now on the table and available to kids in almost every state post the O'Bannon decision and the NCAA relaxing some of their rules that prohibited that.
And I see major advantages for students. With this in general, just
it's got a lot of neat benefits that I think that go with it. This is not going to be an exhaustive list, but I'd say to you there are three really cool beneficiaries of this. It certainly allows somebody who is a student to not have to worry about immediately making a decision on a professional career.
Right.
If you're
multi-sport athletes,
if you're a student who comes from a family who has financial need, for being in school might be a hardship. If you're good, it allows you to benefit, at least in the short term, in ways that might allow you to make a better decision, or a more informed or a more delayed decision on whether I'm going to turn pro.
Right. And you get that full opportunity to get a full education. You don't have to go back for it, which is
it might keep you in school a little longer while on the first go around. And I think because you're suddenly in business for yourself a little bit, it may make you more attentive to the business aspects.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. When it's your money and your livelihood on stake, then you kind of want to pay a little bit more attention.
As somebody who teaches a class called Representing the Professional Athlete, if I had a professional athlete in it, it would make they'd be like, oh, that's my interest, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how interested students are necessarily in contracts that have gross and nets, but if somebody offered you 10% of sales, you'd probably really want to know quickly, are you giving that 10% of the gross, 10% of the net? Who's calculating it?
Right.
How are we getting paid? When are we getting paid?
10% of what,
10%
sir?
of what? Let's define it. And, a 2-page contract probably won't work for that. You'll want a 12. You'll want to define those terms really carefully. So,
then you'll need somebody to help you with that. You'll need that guidance and that support.
You'll need advisors, and you'll need advisors who you can trust. So there's a lot of good in this. I think it also helps student athletes be a little more entrepreneurial and a little more bought in. And then I think the last winner in it, when you think about it, is going to be college athletics itself. And I was a wrestler in college. I wrestled through a little bit of the amateur wrestling. But Gable Steveson, who just won the gold medal in Tokyo, who has 2 years of wrestling eligibility left at Minnesota, will undoubtedly come home to Minnesota and wrestle. He won't have to make the choice of do I forego my college eligibility to make money in MMA. He can simply say, you know what, now that's allowed. I'm gonna wrestle in college because college wrestling gets good crowds and generates really good importance for me. And so I think it helps people make the choice. But I also think schools will be the winner because there'll just be greater interest in college sports.
Right. Do you think it's also going to help these athletes? I mean, I think that now they're going to be getting contracts to sign now instead of just when they're say if they go into the professional, maybe having that opportunity to look at a contract for the first time and say,
I think it's going to help them with their level of sophistication. Yeah, if they're earnest about it and want to know about it, I think it could be it's a really cool learning. We've often talked about and hey, I argued for it for years. I had a dean who used to tell all our students at NYU, you did not come here to be athletes, you came here to be sports business professionals. And I'm like, yeah, but without athletes, we really don't have much of a sports business to talk about. So I wasn't so anti-athlete at the time. And I think it's important for athletes to understand just the amount of people who are building lives and careers around what they love.
Well, and it's crazy because now I remember growing up, I couldn't have a business and I couldn't even think about a business or have a business while I was playing sports or anything like that. I mean, and I just didn't even think about it because it wasn't a possibility. And it really does, you think about it now and it opens your mind to that, wow, okay, there's so many different opportunities to start so many different things and wear those different hats, kind of like you've done, where you've been able to go and do so many different things.
Yeah, entrepreneurs are just getting younger and younger. It seems like there was so many opportunities.
Well, and remember, most entrepreneurs fail a few times, so you got to have a little bit of resilience. But resilience is never a bad thing to breed into you and build into your future, right? So yeah, no, I think it has a lot of advantage, and I do think it has the tendency to be a win-win. I'm old enough to remember the '92 Olympics, which is the one when most of the professionalism barriers went down in the '92 games. And just the sight of Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen outside the stadium in Barcelona waiting to walk in just really changed the tenor of those games. Yeah. That the best professional athletes in their sport were now coming to the Olympics, and those games have prospered as a result. In fact, maybe they prospered so much that they're almost too expensive to host, but that's another story.
Oh, yeah. Even European sports, as far as basketball, has really benefited from Olympic Games and bringing top tier athletes over to the NBA and stuff like that. I think it's a great thing.
It's at least enhanced the global nature of all of our sports.
Yeah, absolutely. So since we're on the subject, the Olympics, what were you most excited about watching? What event were you most excited about watching this year?
There's not really much about the Olympics I don't like. So let's start with the questions. From a risk and function aspect and a legacy aspect, holding these games probably would be hard to return much on investment or on opportunity for Tokyo. So these games will go down as really a financial challenge. They were expensive. It'll really depend. Did Tokyo get more from it later? It'll take years to calculate. But did Tokyo build things that hosted future events? Did they get new visitors? Do you want to go visit where the Olympics were held in the future?
Don't most host countries kind of struggle? It's not as far as struggle, but it's not as financially beneficial as most people might think that hosting an Olympic.
The U.S. Olympic Games tend to make money, I think, in part because we have 300 million people. We have corporations that want to be a part of it, and when they're on U.S. soil, the excitement is just that much higher. So the Atlanta Games aren't really terribly memorable, but they made plenty of money.
Yeah.
And so the Olympics in the U.S., the sponsor dollars are just heightened. Yeah. The Barcelona games are the ones that are unique, but they're also those games that were the first of allowing the professionals. They were extraordinarily well run, and they talk about a thing called the Barcelona effect. Barcelona made maybe $1 off the games, or maybe they lost billions in infrastructure investment that doesn't get calculated in that pile. It's hard to assess, but Barcelona became the second most visited city in the world for about 20 years after that. And if you wanted to go to Barcelona and you're listening to this, like, it was a good chance it was those Olympic Games that made you want to go there. So there are some really transformative stories. They're not all of them, but there are some transformative stories about the Olympics. So I'm a big Olympic geek. So I don't know whether we should have held these Olympic Games, but I would honestly tell you I don't think there's ever been Olympic Games that were more needed. Even if television viewership was way down, even if nothing has even if people didn't notice,
that's right.
We just needed that symbol of normalcy in a way.
It's still brought people together in different ways, like literally, like, I mean, just even knowing that you're watching this, there's other people watching this, it gave you that kind of a feeling of, okay, we're a little bit back to normal here, like we're in the right direction here.
In the first week, when it starts to draw an audience in. So, we'll have the controversy about Simone Biles, who put a lot of focus on mental health and performance and how important that is. And I think she's done great service to her sport and to the community. Yeah. So very hard to criticize that. Without a swimming star, Caleb Dressel kind of stepped out in the second part of the week, and he was kind of fun in the way that he is. So, that some things kind of went right in the Olympics. I thought the second week of the Olympics was pretty extraordinary. The track meet was amazing, even if there were some bumbled performances, even if the U.S. didn't do well. I just thought there were really amazing things about this Olympics, and it happened in the performance. So if you want to think about Olympics, getting rid of all the other fluff and just think about the athletes, this will go down as a pretty cool Olympics that was very needed. So I thought it was really, really good in that way. So I was very excited by these games. I've written and talked and tweeted about Otto Boland announcing track and field and thinking there's nobody better. And I think of the amazing women. The U.S. wrestling team did well, and I'm a former wrestler, so I like that and watch that. But I think the women who participated and had something to say through these games, Allison Felix, Dalilah Muhammad, Sydney McLaughlin, I think Mo on the track, are all extraordinary stories because it was women who performed particularly well, who were able to say, kind of proverbially, next man up, and help make that story. And if you think about it, in the U.S., we're the inheritors of a remarkable tradition. Title IX, the equal opportunity for women in sports through elementary, through high school, and through college, has been a unique thing in the U.S. and it's made U.S. women lovers and competitive in sport, and I think it's an awesome thing to think about and celebrate that legacy. You kind of want the men, you kind of want the U.S. men to pick it up a bit along with, and carry. But it was the women who brought it home in this year. In a year when so much turmoil has been out there.
Yeah, right.
There's some interesting stories. U.S. women have turned their back on bigger sponsors and moved over to smaller sponsors. And so that's a really interesting story to think about. What drives a woman athlete? What are her opportunities in the marketplace?
Right.
And what does she stand for? Is another remarkable thing to think about. So, yeah, I was very taken by the great role models that young women have coming out of these Olympics. So, yeah, they were pretty cool. I'm ready for them to continue. So just let's run them again. So the good news is we don't have to wait 4 years.
Yeah, I'm ready. Me too.
And the Olympic movement
rerun it.
is going to benefit a little bit out of this triennial.
No, I know, right? Waiting for
because I think they think Paris is going to be that kind of. Hopefully, we're past COVID. We're a world recovered. Hopefully, everybody's safe and healthy, and the world will want to go to Paris for that one. Yeah. Who doesn't want to go there now? Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Who doesn't want to go there? I think that's going to be a really big. And especially if he gets another boost like Barcelona did, like you said in the last one. You get there, you do some stuff, and you're like, hey, look, now we got vacation spot, brings in revenue, all that good stuff. So
one has aesthetically there. You definitely want to go, and since you're young, I'll give you the best piece. If you can go with somebody you really like and care about, it's even better.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool place. I haven't been there yet, but I definitely plan on it.
Yeah, no, the Olympic Games might be pretty cool nonetheless. So, and I represented some athletes in Olympic sports along the way, so that's always an interesting one because you're always thinking about kind of what is that name, image, and likeness deal, and how do you put that deal together to carry them through. They're going to make all their money. They're going to create all their attention in one 2-week period. How do you carry that through the next 4 years? Of their
and a lot of them are so young. What age are they starting off at? Like 14, 15 these days? And
a lot of people talked about the pressure, and that's really an interesting thing to think about. The Olympics were delayed. People had to move through that year of pressure and trials and other things. So yeah, the pressure was 5 years of pressure, not 4 years of pressure now.
Jesus,
that's crazy. I love it. So we were talking a little bit about a little bit earlier before you actually got on about the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, and we didn't know too much about it. We kind of wanted to see if you could enlighten us a little bit on what you do there, and kind of just.
I just got named to a working group in compliance there, but it's important for everyone to know about kind of the administration of amateur sports in the United States. So we have a law in the United States called the Ted Stevens Act. He was a senator from Alaska who was very into the Olympic movement. And it basically created the U.S. Olympic Committee, not as a government agency, but as a government chartered agency to basically have the right to use the Olympic rings, to send teams to the Olympic Games and other international competitions. It created national governing bodies for sport. There are some 55 or so in the Olympic movement. And you probably had a card: USA Track and Field, USA Wrestling, USA Swimming. They're all national governing bodies, parts of the Olympic Committee. And then we found there were a lot of challenges. Obviously, the sport of gymnastics had a number of crises, but other sports have had sexual harassment, youth protection issues as we go through it. And they created an entity called the Center for Safe Sport as an independent arbitrator of all issues in the Olympic movement. So the Center for Safe Sport...
That's a great idea.
The Center for Safe Sport has jurisdiction over every athlete, coach, and member of the Olympic movement. Some 14 million people, I think, is the total size of it. Now, most people don't know they might be members of that. If you ever entered a swim meet as a kid and got a U.S. swimming card, you might be a member.
So
a lot of coaches, college coaches in particular, but others may not even be aware of their relationship to it. But this body, the Center for Safe Sport, has control of and has adjudicatory control over all these sports. So it's an unusual relationship. It's an extraordinary level of jurisdiction, and it's not a lot of people know about it. They're still a fairly new entity. They were created in 2018, so they operate as sort of a superconduct board in sexual harassment. But they also audit the national governing bodies to make sure those governing bodies are compliant. That's the group I'm kind of going to be working with. But I've been very interested in them and their jurisdiction, and helping educate coaches and athletes as to what they can do and what they can't do, and how this new court and this new legal system or quasi-legal system fits into the whole world of sport. So that's one area that I've been working on. I'm also on the ethics committee of a national governing body, USA Weightlifting. So with another group of mostly lawyers, but some competitors as well, we meet to talk about ethical violations in the sport of weightlifting. So both those two jurisdictions are concurrent. So yeah, I've kind of moved into kind of keeping some space in the Olympic movement too, because it's so interesting. Frankly, it's such a huge entity, and I'm going to switch back to a business aspect of it, which doesn't mean to say that ethics aren't incredibly important, because I think better business is enhanced by better ethics. But there are 192. I actually might be wrong about that. There are 187 nations in the United Nations General Assembly, and it might be 188. South Sudan came in, so 188 nations in the UN, and there are 206 in the Olympic movement. So the Olympic movement has bigger reach than the UN. And Coca-Cola has been a sponsor of the Olympics for 97 years. And Coca-Cola is sold in 205 of those 206 countries. Right. So
what
you start to think about the value of sport, the value of the Olympics. It's a global platform. It's a global connector. So you can't get a Coke in North Korea, and so consequently they're not selling it there. But yeah, everywhere else, Coke, McDonald's, all travel on that Olympic platform.
Absolutely.
That is incredible. That's really incredible to actually think about. I mean, it's really and think of how much it's gone through because
90 plus years. Huh?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit what else you got going on. I know you have a chapter in a new book, a new textbook out. What's
I haven't quite written a book, but I wrote a textbook chapter. It's a sport finance textbook. It's published by Dr. Karen Weaver. Just came out. It's called Sports Finance. Not the most imaginative title, but it's a well worth it book. I wrote a chapter on stadium finance, and it really takes apart both why we've replaced all the stadiums in the United States, or all the major professional stadiums, or most of the major professional stadiums, over the last 30 years. There are still some exceptions, but Dodger Stadium was a new stadium when I was growing up, and now it's one of the oldest stadiums left in baseball. We won't replace Camden Yards. I'm sorry, we won't replace Fenway, and we won't replace Wrigley, because they're historic. But they basically have gutted them and built so much around it to create revenue. So it's really about this drive to build new stadiums to capture fan dollars in a new and a more interesting way, and how that influences just all the decisions.
Well, it's funny, you go to a Padre game, and you go and you could walk around the whole game and not see any of the game because there's so much stuff now in the stadium. You got bars over here, you got rock climbing or whatever you got over here. You could throw a pitch into here. It's crazy, it's all these new things that they're throwing in and adding. It's pretty crazy.
I haven't been to Raider Stadium, but I can only imagine. I think it's Allegiant Stadium, in Las Vegas.
It's to keep you engaged, and it's to keep you interested, but it's also to get more of your spend and to keep you coming back. And some of it's just we don't want to sit in our seats. We want to move about.
Right.
You are also going to see, this is something that's actually fallen on me a lot, so I've learned a lot more about it than I would ever want to know in real life, because I'm not a bettor. But the confluence of sports betting and sports entertainment is really coming fast. That was legalized 3 years ago in 2018 with the Supreme Court decision that allowed states to legalize sports betting, and so far we have sports betting legal in 20 states, on its way to legalization in another 10, and it's now really the idea that we would talk about placing bets on in-game situations are real, and obviously that presented a challenge to me at Penn State, and something I had to learn a lot about in the process, and how we had to educate our student athletes and our trainers and our leadership essentially on how complex this is.
Well, that's how fast things can change, and you got to kind of be the one to change with it and then teach it.
Yeah, which is very. I've got to watch the next crisis come, and I've got to be able to tell everybody how we deal with it.
Absolutely.
Not a guarantee that we will, but at least to recognize it early so that we're not blindsided and we're not too slow in reacting if it does happen.
Right. And you're never going to catch, I feel like, everything right away, because things do change fast. Nobody puts out all the information right away, I feel like. You really got to do research and kind of understand it to be able to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it still leaves me a little surprised by the amount of sports that a college offers that get bet on. I'm still always shocked that betting on baseball and betting on softball, because I'm not even sure how you bet on them. Have you ever seen the odds? It's like I don't even understand what they mean. But and sure, your baseball team's going to lose, 60 times a year. Even a good team loses 60 times a year.
Yeah.
So it's always hard to think about how they take action on that, and then also to watch how prop bets, proposition betting, that don't affect the outcome of the contest are popular. So,
Like who's going to get the first hit in the second quarter, or
Yeah, some weird
and
stuff
if you
like
have
that,
integrity in your title, you're always worried is can that be manipulated? So
yeah,
and
exactly.
and everything can be manipulated.
Like
which
who's
is
going
the
to walk
problem.
out with their hat backwards or
The
something
good
like that?
news-
Something simple
the
that
good
someone can
news
easily
about
change.
it in the pros, why the pro leagues have it a little bit better than colleges do in that space, is you're not going to risk a $650,000 NFL contract to take a small bet. It will take a
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
actually
exactly.
I was going to ask you about that. It might be a little bit off, but I was
and
really
big bets are
interested to
easier to
see.
monitor,
So
right? It's just
right. So is there these guys that are able to get the NIL and able to get money through that, if they get in trouble during school, does that have anything to do with NIL? Can they say, "Hey, look, I mean, they can't really say you can't. You got to stop collecting from these guys. You're not really on the team. Say they got in trouble or something like that."
so
I mean, that's a weird
it does
situation. I
create
feel like.
an interconnectivity of your play to your value, right? You wouldn't have any value if you weren't in the team or you weren't playing.
Yeah.
So one of the
Right.
things but it's also clear in the NCAA rules you can't get paid to play. So one of the key understandings, kind of a hard piece to educate, but while NIL is a specific group of external activity done outside the university with third parties, I think a lot of universities are saying, look, what you can't contract to them or promise to them is your playing time, your participation, your success. So ultimately, that's a part of the educational process is your relationship to the team and your ability to obey the team rules and your ability to stay on the field and be eligible is between the university and the student athlete. And anything
And you'd hope that would give people a
anything you do in
motivation to be
NIL
good
is
and
between
to
you and
stay
the
well
third
off.
party, and you can't reach over to us and give me guarantees about that part of it, right? So that's a complex piece. It's something we're working on and in writing and trying to get into educate all our student athletes about policy. But it is complex because nobody really broke that down when they started thinking about that.
Right. And when I first started hearing about this, I mean, I was like, how is it going to even be paid? I wasn't even thinking NIL. I was thinking, okay, well, is it going to be like coming from the stadium, the attendance?
Contracting to the athlete, and obviously
Yeah.
there's some really good ones if you think about it. Some college athletes are very famous. Some are locally famous and influencers. There's a whole bunch of different reasons why you choose to work with a student athlete, even maybe more than a professional athlete. Maybe cost would be one factor, but maybe reach would be two. So they're all reasons you do it. But yeah, it's really, if you think about it, on one hand, the school has a relationship on the left, the player is in the middle, and then third parties for NIL activity are on the outside. But yeah, you can't reach back. And one of my favorite stories is I'm good friends with a guy by the name of Don McPherson. Don was the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. He was the Maxwell Trophy winner. Don and I are both now in our 50s, but Don was one of the greatest college players of his time. And all he could think about is, he played at Syracuse, all he could think about is, now with NIL, I mean, my God, we're beating Colgate 49-0 at the half. They take me out. How do I stay in? I'm losing money. That's right.
You're losing money.
Instead of having 7 touchdown passes, I've got I could have 14.
Oh, man.
So yeah, we don't want to take any of the prop bets.
And there goes those prop bets again.
You easily just picked up on that, Wes. It's like there is an interconnection of these things, and to some degree, everybody has to be cognizant of how that comes together. Yeah, and that is one of the change parts of our world. And again, if you're a pro player with an $800,000 minimum contract in the NBA, or a $650 in football, or $550 in baseball, yeah, you're not going to risk it on what a famous law professor who I worked with, Arthur Miller, called small beer. But it is a bigger risk when you're not making a whole lot of money. So the one thing I'm hoping NIL does is student athletes who are doing well with NIL will want to protect their NIL and not get fired, not essentially get cut from the team because they messed up by dealing with gambling.
Each action will be thought about a little bit more. In
And that's what I was thinking. Yeah, maybe hold guys a little bit more,
have a financial
accountable
for things that
they care more is the part about it. And look, young people are young people, and they're smart. They're smart and they're dumb in equal measures. We learn and grow. I'm older and I'm still smart and dumb in equal measures. I just have
absolutely.
Sense of what I just have a better sense of what I'm smart about and a smaller sense of what I'm dumb at, right? It's
like, it should be a guy thing.
Like, play things. You wouldn't want to see me try to do physical things the way I once did. I have a career-ending wrist injury from yoga. I mean, who has a yoga injury? But yeah, those are the things that we think about as we do these things.
Man, I love it. Well, I wish we had hours and hours with you. That time flew by so fast,
really
and I really hope that that we could get you on again here. But I mean, in closing, any advice for some of these student athletes that are coming in that you could possibly give them to push them forward here?
I think this is going to sound like terrible advice from a lawyer in his mid-50s. But the really transformational power of your education is your education. I've worked with pro athletes. I've worked with them, and I know a lot who finished their careers with not enough money. The idea that you're going to change, you're going to earn enough through play, probably not going to happen. That it's going to be enough that you'll never have to work again. It'll just give you more choices. But I do think the transformational power, the ultimate choice power, is education. And I love the idea. The thing that made me happiest as a professor, what makes me happiest as a lawyer, is how I link education and or higher education with sports. And that's the coolest thing. So if you love sports and you love education, there are opportunities to pursue both, the opportunity to use both to get more choices and more options. That's really the cool bit. So those aren't performance T-shirts, are they? I love them. We all want them, but are they sweat wicking? Can we get the sweat wicking? I I will definitely come back, and I'm honored to do this. I hope this was a fun time for you. It was for me.